So, hi Shelby. Thanks for doing the podcast. This is interesting. Shelby's an entrepreneur who's got a really interesting background and has an interesting pathway. So we'll get to know him a little bit better. We'll talk about his company. We'll talk about his sales approach. We'll talk about what he does for his clients. But quickly, Shelby, maybe give us a little rundown of what you do and then we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks, Paul. First off, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to just kind of hang out with you and have a conversation. And hopefully, your audience will get a little bit of insight of what some of my background, et cetera, could help them in any way. So thanks. Thanks for being on. And your first question is?
My first question is tell us a little bit. You're very welcome, by the way. Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
First question is tell us a little bit about let's just go in that direction first, what your company does. So, give
sure.
us like the 30-second or 1 minute elevator pitch so that people know who they're listening to.
Sure. So my I think that when I talk to my friends and I consider you a friend, when I tell them what I do, I tell them that life has been preparing me for what I do today. And the thing that I do specifically is I'm a business coach. So I specifically coach leadership teams at this point. I'm not doing one-on-one. I will probably one day, but for now it's senior leadership teams in business. And therefore that's my main part of the work that I do. I have a specialty around small group dynamics. In other words, I work with groups like EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, and YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And I'm a certified forum facilitator for them. So anything that has to do with forum or mastermind type of groups, that is also an area of my specialty.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for that. One thing I've noticed, Shelby, is, I'm also a consultant, and there's a lot of consultants out there. And I don't know if you agree with me, but I think the one of the reasons that people choose a consultant goes beyond our description. It goes to the fact of how we connect with the individual. So I guess my first question to you is how do you connect? Let's say you meet someone for the first time. How do you get to know them, or how do you convince them if you feel they're the right client for you to
Hmm.
come on board? So I guess my question is, tell me a little bit about your style and the questions you ask and how you get to know your people, your potential
Yeah,
clients.
my style. Yeah, thanks. I think my style is, I would call it maybe a little bit organic and very relational. And what I mean by that is I approach someone with curiosity first. And that is more around, I'm curious about the person and what they do and how they do whatever it is. And so the conversation starts like that. And my mindset is never, I'm trying to sell you something. I'm always more of an abundant minded type of person. And so I felt that throughout my history as a business individual and a business owner, etc., I found that in my early days, it was very transactional in my approach, where I had quotas and I had numbers to hit. And so I would approach the person more of a, what can I sell them? Where as I evolved and I think I matured a little bit, what happened is it really shifted for me, and it stopped being about the transaction and it started being about the person and what is it that is that I might be able to offer them. And my services right now as a business coach, I really do in my heart feel that I have some things to share that if I do share them and my clients adopt the methodologies that I use, their lives can be transformed. And so for me, that's a pretty major deal. And so when I come with that and I bring that into the conversation, I believe my client feels it, or my potential client feels it, that Shelby's not trying to sell me anything. He actually cares for me as an individual. And I feel that definitely, that, by the way, that's my approach. That's how I go about it.
So if I was to summarize in a sense, it's get to know the individual. It's not about selling me or yourself. It's about helping them achieve an objective or a goal.
100%.
Yeah.
It's
That's why
really
we get
around.
along anyway. Because
I think so.
I feel exactly the same way, and I think it's important for me, anyways, and that's why you're on this podcast, honestly, because a lot of people forget that it's not a transaction; it's about helping people achieve their objectives. Now, of course, we're both of a certain age, uh, so I think our experience is important too, right? I think our background, our knowledge, our expertise comes into play, and that will be put forward at one point. But ultimately, it's about helping that client achieve an objective. Um, and I sense that, like when I talk to you, I sense that. Now, you say that to me, and I have another question for you.
Yeah.
And this is my question for you. If I ask you personally, do you know Simon Sinek? I think we've spoken about him. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if I went over to my bookshelf, I'd pull his book
Yeah,
off the
yeah, yeah,
shelf.
getting to why. Yeah, exactly.
So yes, I'm a student of his work.
Okay, and so am I. And I guess my question to you is, what is your why? And let's define what that is for people who don't know Simon Sinek. Your why is sort of like your motivation, your what's in your heart, why you do stuff. So if I was to ask you, Shelby, what is your what in a work structure, what is your why? What are you hoping to achieve? What is your objective?
Sure. And
Pretty
so
deep,
it's
eh?
it's
Five
really
minutes in, it's really deep. All right.
yeah. I mean, there are different layers of this, and because it's a business podcast, I'm going to go definitely on the business side. And for me,
We'll get to the
again,
personal stuff later.
yeah, we'll get to it. Again, it's been an evolution and a discovery. And so when I ask my clients this question, or it's that oftentimes they're a little bit stumped. And so, what I want to maybe share with the audience is that it's not something that like you come up with like off the just the question happens or is asked, and then you know automatically. It has taken me years to figure this out. When I did read Simon Sinek's book, it just started helping me kind of craft what it is. And for me, it's really simple. I help business entrepreneurs live their best lives. And I do that in three different ways. I have, again, discovered that as a business owner, I need systems in my business to be able to, make my business run really, really well. And so, I have a business, or I do work with my clients that has to do with what I call a business operating system. And so that's one pillar, if you will. The second pillar is figured out in my life that I need a peer group, other individuals like me, business people, that when I talk to them, they get me, they understand what I'm living, and I can share and go deep, and we can learn from each other. And the third piece is all this is great, having a business and thriving and trying to go for it, and having peers. But if I don't have health in my life, if my body is not strong, my mind, my physical, my spiritual isn't strong, I have nothing. And so those are the three pillars that I coach on to just make sure that that's the foundation. And if we have the foundation, then we can do extraordinary things. And so that's my why. I simply help business leaders live their best lives because they can. There's untapped potential in all of us, and I feel so strongly that it's my job to kind of make my clients understand and realize that they have so much more in them, and the reason I want to do that is that it actually influences and impacts the world, and that's kind of a big statement, but it is really true. It's kind of like the domino effect. If I can affect you, Paul, then you will be able to affect others, even the people listening to this podcast, and so on and so forth. If there's one thing that your audience takes away from this particular podcast, I feel like I've contributed to my why.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. I've got a bunch of questions coming up from what you just said. So the
Sure.
first one is, when you say you help business leaders live their best lives, do you mean make the most money, achieve their financial goals, or do you mean their personal happiness? And I have to ask this because, it
Yeah.
could go both ways, right?
So it's a great question, and What I say is it depends on the actual individual. Now,
Okay.
what I've learned as a business owner is that I can't separate my business from my life. It's just all blended together. And
Mhm.
so, the the business name that I have for a bit, it's BOS 360. And so business operating system 360 degrees. It's really, how do you manage this crazy life of an entrepreneur? And so I think it's the blended would be my answer. So it's is what are you looking for in your life, and are you getting what you want from your business? Are you getting what you want from your energy as a person? How about your personal growth? Are you continuously learning new things? Where are you? And so it's a conversation that we start with, and we evolve from there. But the three pillars that I talked to you about are really the foundation, and we evolve from there. So some of my clients would say, well, I really want to fix my business, and when I say fix, I mean, just get more out of my business than, that, because I know I can. There's some frustration there usually about different areas. Now, just to be clear, I'm not a turnaround expert. Like, if the business is broken, that's not me. I'll invite them to go see another friend of mine. For me, it's more around like it's not quite dialed in, and I can help you. And so usually it starts with a business component, and then it evolves from there. And understanding that there's so much more to the entrepreneur than just the business. And so then we evolved in the conversation.
Okay, very interesting. I have a question for you because this is something I've struggled with in the past with some of the clients I'm looking at. Um, how do you decide who you want to work with? And what do I mean by that? So let's make it an extreme case. Let's say you meet a potential client, they want to work for you, but you realize that they're not the most honest business people, or what they're trying to do is maybe shady. And I'm giving an extreme example here, but
Sure.
hopefully
Yeah.
you don't meet too many of those. um, you know, will you refuse, or have you refused to work with certain clients because you just don't connect with them?
Right. This is also something that I have to say, like, I'm 7 years old, so I have a little bit of a journey in me. And so there's some things that I've learned along the way. And again, I have to say that early in my days, I just take on anybody. I'm not in the coaching piece, but in my entrepreneurial journey, because
Yeah,
I truthfully just needed to get sales going.
yeah,
And therefore, I just kind of picked up whatever I could.
yeah,
Uh, I just needed to survive. And
yeah,
so I get that. I've been there, done that. I understand when as I journeyed and moved forward, I started to understand that I was actually creating a lot of havoc and a lot of pain in my life when I did take on some clients that were not a good fit. And so today, and we'll talk probably about sales process and what my first, like, once I do get a lead in, the first thing that I would do is, are they target market? And then I have a conversation with them, and I call it a discovery meeting. I spend an hour and a half with my clients, and I tell them out of the gates, look, I know you're curious about what I'm doing. However, it may not be a good fit. So again, this is my abundant mindedness, or like, that's how I approach it. And it's really, and I tell them, it's about fit. Like, you need to be convinced that what I have for you, is really something that you can use, and you feel that it's going to be useful for you and impactful. And I also need to feel the same way, because truth be told, sometimes it's not a good fit. And I have said no to some entrepreneurs. I remember one point there was this person in Ontario, that, because I coach in Montreal and Toronto
yep,
as well. And this guy was, we sat down, he was explaining to me what was going on in his business, and how he was overwhelmed, and how he was having issues and different things, and that's fine. And at the end of the conversation, I said, I don't want to waste your time, because you've just told me that what I have for you, you actually won't do. And he said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, of course I will. I want to do this. And I said, actually, you won't, because you've just explained to me what was going, like, how you behave and how you do things. And I said, it's not going to work out. And he was upset with me, but I said, at the end of the day, I'm here to really be impactful. I knew he wasn't going to do the work. So the analogy I have here, Paul, is that, Sometimes, so think about like if you wanted to get in great shape, what would you probably do?
Go to the gym.
Go to the gym. That's right. And so you'd sign up for the gym, you go to the gym, and if you really wanted to get awesome, you probably get a coach, and they
Yeah.
would teach you how to work out because that's the fast track on getting strong. You could show up to the gym, you might get injured if you don't know what you're doing, etc. But the idea is that you probably get a coach to fast track your whatever your goals and objectives are. However, this guy was telling me like I'm signing up to the gym, but I knew that he might go to the gym, but probably wouldn't work out, maybe socialize, and eventually wouldn't show up. He'd have the membership, but he wouldn't show up at the gym. So it's one thing to want, but you absolutely it's all about taking action. And
So
if
Shelby,
there's
I
one,
have I totally
yeah,
agree with you, and I love it. I want to know though, how
yeah,
quickly do you know that they're not the right fit? And what are what are the questions you ask? Like, what's the kind
yeah.
of question you ask someone, and what is it that made you say, like, you know what, it's not that I don't like you, whatever, but when you're answering this, I know you're not going to do it because obviously there's some questions or there's a structure to that question, which sort of brings us to your sales process. But tell me what are the questions or what are the things you're looking for to figure out whether there's a fit or not?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm a real structured guy. I believe in processes, playbooks, etc.
Yeah.
And my like hour and a half discovery meeting is really like I've taken a lot of time to think this through. And so there's a couple of sections to it, and I tell them a little bit about me, what I do, and
Mhm.
how I what my background is. Then I ask questions about them, and so their biggest pain points, and this is me qualifying them, right?
Yeah.
And it's around the mindset. Like, yes, I want to know what, some of their struggles. I call it the 3 a.m. thoughts. And so I asked one of my questions is, so what keeps you awake at night? Or if you were to wake up at 3 in the morning, what do you think about the business that's a pain point for you? So I collect information
I love
from
that.
them.
You gotta pause there. I love that. So you're telling me that you sit there with someone and you say, okay, when you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're worried about your business, what do you think about? I love
What's
it.
your biggest problem?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, what's keeping you awake at night? And by the way, it's not always
By
a
the way, for
problem.
me, it's a 1 a.m., it's 4 a.m.
There you go. Oftentimes I'll hear a problem. Once in a while, I'll hear an opportunity, right? So the 3 a.m. thoughts are not always problematic. Sometimes you're super excited about an opportunity, but there might be roadblocks. You're not sure how to get to it or how to attack it, et cetera, and to be successful. So I want to be clear that these 3 a.m. thoughts are not always problematic in
Yeah.
nature. They're sometimes opportunistic. And so it's an interview, right? I'm interviewing them as much as they are interviewing me. At this point, I'm always with the senior leadership team. It's not a one-on-one.
Oh, it's
So
not a
it's
one-on-one. Okay, so
no, it's
okay, all right, okay.
that's right. So my discovery meeting, I've had a pre-meeting here, so to qualify, and I let the owner of the business know that if you're interested, I give an hour and a half of my time, and by the time we're done, you're going to know if this is for you or not, and vice versa, the same.
And then
And
they bring it, so they bring in the leadership team after that hour and a half for that hour and a half meeting.
correct. And so, and I also tell them, so this is also part of my process, is that I let them know when I in my qualifying call that no matter what happens, one, it's you're getting me for free for an hour and a half. And I will be leaving you and your leadership team some tools that are super powerful. And even if we don't do business together, you can walk away with some things that you can do right away that will impact your business in a positive way. Like that's guaranteed. And
Yeah.
so the only risk of that
So no
is
matter
just,
what, they walk away with tools. They have a 90-minute meeting. So I guess the risk you're about to say, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, the only risk is really the time of you and your executive team or leadership team spending time with me. But hopefully you can see right away that there's benefit coming out of that meeting
Yeah.
out of the gates. And so
Okay, so I'm
so that's
curious
my
though, because
first,
I know I'm harping on this and
yeah,
don't get mad at me, but how so you're having this 90-minute meeting, okay? Let's say you're talking to me and then you're going, no, it's not gonna work. Like
right.
what is it?
I'm getting to it. I'm coming there. So what I really want you and your audience to know here is that what's really important is that this is all baked in, right? This is a formula. So my pre-qualifying, if they're coming and high and not sure, that's a no for me.
Uh,
That's a hell no, right? Because they have to be open-minded to what I just said to them,
yeah.
right? Low risk. I'm going to give you tools. Like I'm giving you something, and I'm giving you an hour and a half of my time. If they don't see the benefit of that, it's a hell no right away,
Well, yeah, of
right? So
course.
I don't want.
If right away they're thinking, if that means they maybe not trust you or they don't believe in you,
Yeah,
and you don't have time to waste with that. I
Paul,
totally.
it's they're not going to go to the gym. They're not going to
Yeah,
go work out.
yeah,
So it's a that's my
yeah.
first
They want
qualifier.
to go to the ice cream store and eat a sundae
Yeah,
or
you know what? Just forget it. Like,
yeah,
so right away, they need to be open-minded and they must want to grow.
yeah,
So, because that's what I'm all about. So then I get them into the 90, right? Like the an hour and a half
yeah,
meeting, our discovery meeting. And that is where, it's a conversation. And by me asking questions now, because it's a senior leadership team,
yeah.
I also look for the group dynamics. So oftentimes, I see who's speaking the most, who's taking over the conversation. I then facilitate the conversation, and I typically am mindful around asking every single person to speak their truth. And what I mean by that is really, and I craft. Questions like on a scale from 1 to 10, don't overthink it. Just give it to me. Like how would you rate your meetings, this group? From a scale from 1 to 10.
Oh,
And
that's a
then
good
and then I
question.
say write it down, right? And I want you to write it down. And then when I say now let's share your information and say the number you wrote down so you're not influenced by other people in the
Oh,
room.
that's
And so
good.
sometimes they laugh and giggle and they look at each other. And I can start, I mean, again, I've been doing this for a while, so I can see the
Have you
dynamic of the
gotten
group. So
anyone
this
fired that way, Shelby?
so I have to tell you, I took on one client
Yeah,
a while back. They were doing it was a roofing company, and now they were really growing quickly, and it was metal roofing and whatnot, and whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there. So, but this team was highly dysfunctional, and so in my discovery meeting, I saw it. But again, truth be told, I'm not perfect. I thought I needed a client and they wanted to do this. And I said, nah, I was a little bit, myself dysfunctional. And I said, you know what? I think I can save these people. Like, I think
ah,
I
you
can
had
really
the Messiah, the Messiah.
correct.
We all get that as consultants. We can help them. We can save them.
Exactly. Now, this was a really big lesson for me because in the discovery meeting, I was qualifying them. There was a few things going on. One, I needed a client. Two, I said, I think I can turn them around.
Yeah.
Um, but I have to tell you that it was less than a year. I think we worked together 8 months, and this was, there was a tyrant, inside, yelling and screaming at his team and making people cry. And I thought, oh my gosh, like I kind of saw it. I didn't see to that degree. So
You
Paul,
thought you
that
could
like
maybe
I knew,
make him
right?
change
I
his
knew.
behavior.
Oh yeah, right away. And so my discovery meeting is sort of what lets me know that, yeah, you know what? And I also have to feel that I can be impactful. Otherwise, what am I doing? I'm wasting, their time, my time, and their money. And so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, 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 no, for sure, for sure. That's interesting. And like just to tell you a little bit about the way I do things is when I'm consulting, I try to ask a lot of open-ended questions and I don't have you seem more structured than I am probably in the discovery process. And I'm curious I'm curious and I'm kind of leaning in a way to say that the fact that you ask the same questions probably gives you a very good feel because you have a lot of comparison in the past, right? So if
Correct.
you're asking like the meeting thing, right? You probably know a little bit how it's going to go, and you ask them to write the number first, but you probably know that there's probably in most companies it ranges probably from 5 to 10, right? When
You're right.
and the people that say five probably feel bad, and the people that say 10 probably feel bad because they're too soft, and you're like you kind of know how it's going to go. Am I correct?
You are. I mean, there is some history, but what I'm really doing here, and the technique that I'm using here, is in when I'm qualifying, because remember I said I have a structured agenda for the
Yeah.
meeting, and so we're at the second piece. The third piece is me sharing my tools.
Yeah.
So what the client has just done is told me like, yeah, meetings we suck, as an example, right? I'm not sure. As like I'm just using these words as a trigger. And by the way, I do that sometimes in my teams. I'll use some words to kind of like wake people up and go, oh wow, like you just use that word. I'm like, yeah, because I want to wake you up. So that's what I was just doing there. But so if that is something I've discovered they're low or weak on, when I go to the third piece of my agenda, when I'm sharing my model, I'm going to double down on, oh, you mentioned that you were, let's say, average 3.4 on how your meetings go when you get together. I just so happen to have a really great tool around meetings. Let me explain to you what that looks like. And so I'll slow down a little bit in my model review at that point where I saw the pain point. If they said we're like a 9, 10, I'm going to just say, hey, you know what? It sounds like you're
Yeah.
doing great. We would just simply review, making sure that maybe there's
Yeah.
some tips I can give you to get like to a 10 out of 10 all the time. And so this is a technique in the way my discovery meeting rolls out. So again, I've thought this through, and it helps me, connect with the client, and they start leaning in a bit, right? Like physically, I start seeing them leaning in, and when they're participating, at one point, I'm understanding that okay, they're engaged, and that's what I'm looking for. That's
Yeah.
also a yes or a no situation for me. So if they're starting to engage with me, most of the time, like they don't know me, like who's this guy? Our owner just asked this person. There's another consultant. It's going to be the flavor of the month, and all of a sudden they get into the conversation with me, and they realize this is different. This is
Yeah.
not like it wasn't like we all were able to say something. He actually was able to pull a bunch of stuff out like in an hour and a half that we never knew we were going to talk about, etc. So they start seeing my style,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden at the end, sometimes I've had a client say, okay, like sign me up, like let's go. And I'm perfect. And again, I'm mindful, like I have a final slide of here's what it would look like if we were to do business now together. And again, I use some techniques. And if you just realize what I said, I use the word now,
Yeah.
right? If we were to work together now, here's what it would look like. And so there's a little bit of NLP in there. I mean, I'm a Tony Robbins guy too. Like
Yeah.
I listen to his stuff. I've grown up. I study his things. So I'm using all these different techniques. Only if I feel that this
You
would
can
be
make a
good for
difference.
them. And again, I can
Yeah.
be impactful. Yeah. And
That's
and
great.
so yeah.
So another question I have um, is when you're doing these 90-minute meetings, you're probably discovering a lot of what you're going to be doing with them in the future, right? So how long do you work with clients typically?
So as long as they want, if I keep bringing them great stuff, why would they want to stop working with me?
Okay,
I mean,
so it can be a 10-year relationship, right?
it
Uh,
can be,
okay,
yes.
okay. And do you meet them when you do have clients that you stay with a long time? Do you meet them once a month? Do you meet them once a week? Like, how
Oh,
does that work?
right. So my last agenda item is the how does it look like if we were to work together? I have a launching sequence because it is a system that I teach my clients. So I don't consider myself a consultant. Like I'm never going to tell my clients what they should or shouldn't do around their
Yeah,
business. What I'm going to do is teach them a set of tools. And it's really based on three things. The first thing is, we call it Momentum Day, which has to do with execution excellence. And so again, simple tools that when they use them properly, they actually get results. What a concept, right?
yeah,
And sometimes after I explain these tools to my clients, they look at me and literally sometimes they just kind of like, that's it? That's all you got? I'm like, yeah, let's do that at 100% and see what happens in the business. And then they look at me and kind of giggle sometimes, go, yeah, okay. And then the second piece is what we call vision. And the vision is getting everyone aligned on where we're going. Because here's what I do with them. I say, okay, everyone take a piece of paper out, blank sheet. I usually provide them. And I say, okay, without talking to each other, write down what the vision of the business is. And they all start writing, like they all have something in their head. And then I said, okay, let's compare what we wrote. And it's similar, but like 100% of the time, it's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
And so I explained to them, I said, this is so critical that if someone asks you in the business, like, where are you taking us? That you have the same flippant answer. Like, it's got to be the same. And so this is, again, so the second piece is alignment. So there's a whole way. I have a 2-page strategic plan on how we, and it's really simple stuff, but it's really critical for the business. And the third part is what I call health. And so it's team health, team dynamics. We have some HR tools. We deep into how do we actually speak our truth, like forget the ego. And so there's a lot of work. And I go to Patrick Lencioni here because he's a master at group dynamics. So anyone who is interested and curious, go look up Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, what makes for a great team player, et cetera. There's a lot there. And so I use some of that. So those are the 3 things that I do. So it's a system. And once the system is launched, then I see my clients for a full day once a quarter. And so what I've learned is that humans are well designed. We actually are well designed to work within a 90-day cycle. And so what I mean by that is we're pretty darn good at predicting 90 days out. But after that, it's hard. It's hard to really predict in detail because there's so many moving parts, especially now, right? And so with that, I pulse with my team once a quarter, and I let them know it's okay. So what's happened in the last 3 months, because there's always lessons learned and history tends to repeat itself. So we want to learn the lessons so we can predict better in the future. Then we check in together and say, where are we on the plan that we put together? Like what's happening right now? Where are we on track or off track? And then we say, okay, what do we need to do in the next 3 months to be on track to stay tuned in with our strategic plan that we've put together? So that's kind of the and I bring them. So that's what I do. That's like the major agenda. And then we spend some time on new tools. So every time I speak with or I see a client, I bring them something new that they can add. And so I stack these tools to help run the business. And then once a year, I do a 2-day annual. We call it a retreat where you retreat away from your business, you retreat away from your family, and you retreat away from your hometown. We go somewhere not too far, and really it's a deep dive for 2 days. We do great work on strategy, what's happened in last year, where are we looking, we update our 2-page strategic plan, etc. And then they leave that 2 days with clarity on, okay, we know what we need to do in the next 12 months. And then I get them really good at being able to do town halls. In other words, communicate well to the rest of the organization. Like, here's what we came up with, and this is how you help. And so it's amazing to know how oftentimes employees understand how they impact the plan, because one, they don't even know the plan. When they do, they don't know how to impact it. Well, I turn that around with my clients and say, no, here, and I teach them how to be great communicators as leaders.
So Shelby, this is all great. It's wonderful. What is it that gives you credibility when you meet with them? Is it do you think it's your expertise? And it's an important question to me because I find it interesting. So, in this consulting space, and let's take it out of your world for a second, often you have, and I know it's not exactly consulting, it's more coaching. So in the coaching space, you have a lot of people with different levels of expertise. Sometimes you have very young people, sometimes people who've had multi-billion-dollar companies. And I guess my question to you is twofold. One, maybe what's your expertise that you bring to the table, and how important do you think past expertise is in being able to coach someone to do the right thing? In other words, do you need to be a pro hockey player to coach the hockey players, or can you be a young person that uses your system to coach other companies?
Right. And so I think we started this podcast, and one of the first things I said is well, life has been preparing me to be able to do what I do today. And so this is absolutely true. And so we were talking about my credibility. Well, my background, my DNA is through entrepreneurship. My grandmother was an entrepreneur. My parents both were entrepreneurs. And so it was kind of natural for me to start a business in my early 20s. I've had 4 successful businesses. I've sold one, was in the aerospace industry. The people I sold to was a large corporate it was a global organization. So I got my quote unquote corporate MBA there. And so, yes, it's the hours in the business. And I have to tell you, like, the work I was doing in the past, I wasn't necessarily passionate about, let's say, the aerospace industry or specifically, but I was curious and interested. But at one point, I realized, wow, I have all this this knowledge, I have all this background, and my business friends were telling me, Shelby, you're pretty good. Like when I ask you to help me in my business, you've got this amazing knowledge. You pull out these tools, and right away, like it's impactful. You should think about doing this full time. And I
Okay,
have
so
to
let me
tell you,
let me
at
press
first,
pause there.
I said,
Let me press pause there for a second because before you, and I want to understand it's not a criticism, but before you're telling me
sure.
I try not to consult too much, I try to ask questions and use tools. So I guess my question to you is I know you understand because you've had all those businesses, but do you sort of force yourself not to impart too much information so that it can come from them? Or a big part of it is giving them experience that you've had?
Right. So it's a little bit of both, truthfully. And
Okay.
so my style is, I have learned that the best way, one of a really powerful way to communicate is through sharing of experiences. Be a storyteller of your experiences. And
Okay.
so a client tells me, "Here's my problem," and then I can respond with, "Yeah, like I've had a similar situation in my life. Here's what happened to me. Here's what I did. Here are some of the tools that I've used." And then I stop. I don't tell them, therefore, do what I did or
Yeah.
don't do what I did. I just stop and let them decide for themselves. Oh, yeah, that works for me, or it doesn't. Sometimes I'm more prescriptive. I do have experience. So if all of a sudden my client's like heading to, the edge of the cliff and just about to like, whoa, I'm going to put the red flag and say,
Yeah.
stop. And I will do that. I will intervene. It's rare, but I would do that and say, okay, let's rethink this. And I'll expose what I'm seeing. And then I'll let them validate that, yeah, Shelby, what you're seeing is correct. And we had a blind spot here. And then we'll talk about, okay, what do we do next?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I say we, because again, the set of tools in the business operating system, the tools should help them wherever they are.
Yeah.
The other interesting part, Paul, is that, in all businesses, there's like probably one or two handful of tools that will speak to most of the challenges they have. It's not that complicated. I had one person tell me once, Shelby, it's almost like you've got these secrets that once we know them, you can't unknow them. And now I can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
But it's like going to the gym. You might know, we all know how to get in shape. Do I do it or not? Right? Then it's about moving intention, which is the key to anything.
Yeah. No, that's it's yeah, it's fascinating. So, hey, I want to shift gears a little bit. Tell me about your sales approach. And what I mean by that is like how do you market? How do you get people to sit down with you? Like how do you, your prospecting calls? Where do you find your people? What's your approach? Like let's start with
Right.
marketing.
So I have to,
How do people get to know about BOS 360?
sure. And so there, I'm going to give you two stories. Again, storytelling, right?
That's what a
So
podcast is all about. So yeah, that's why you're here, Shelby.
perfect. So when I decided to get into coaching, I didn't even have a website for the first 2 years. And so why? Because I had all these business friends, because I'm a business person and I was part of this EO group and YPO, and therefore I swam in a pond of like-minded individuals. We were all business owners, and therefore I just started letting them know the new thing I was doing, and literally just calling my friends up by the phone, say, "Hey, I'm excited about my next chapter here in my life, and I just want to share with you what I'm doing." And it's not to get a sale; it's to get some feedback of thinking, you know, about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And in my heart, that's what I was doing. And I have to tell you, there was one group of business individuals and friends that I was with, and there was 9 of them, and I was really like testing it out. I was like, that's what I was like, hey, let me just kind of, I want to get feedback. And at the end, it was the discovery meeting, right? That's what I was doing. And at the end, 4 of them looked at me and they said, okay, like sign me up. And I thought, what? Like, what just happened? I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so my first go-to is, there's a lot of head trash, I call it that way, around marketing, sales. I have to do all these things. I have to be perfect. I didn't even have a freaking website. And so at one point, you just need to go like, what's the low-hanging fruit here?
Yeah.
And my answer was, call my friends, like call the people I know, just
Yeah.
call them
Yeah.
and have a conversation. So if there's one thing in sales is get on the like on the phone, talk to people, get in the habit, like it's a muscle. Every day, talk to people about what you're doing. So that's like the low hanging fruit, right? And eventually, it's like I don't have any more people to talk to. Okay, then pick up the phone, call Paul, right? Because like okay, he's not a client of mine, yeah, but Paul knows other people, and
Yeah.
so just share with people what you're doing. So that's the first piece. Now, my business has evolved. Now I'm a solo coach right now. I have an assistant. I have an EA. I have other people around me that help me. But I am trying to now scale my coaching business with other coaches. And so this is where now I need to get Boss 360 exposed to the world. And so we are in the early days of this. One of the things that I've noticed, and by the way, all the best coaches, right? I
All the
get
best
coached,
coaches.
and so
Sorry,
my
you
coaches.
cut out there for a second. Would you say all your
Yeah.
best coaches what?
So all the best coaches have coaches.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
All
Yes.
right. And so I have a coach. His name is Dan Martell. Look him up. He just wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. And
Okay.
so I am in his program. I use his stuff all the time for myself and for my clients. All this to say is I am learning that the traditional method of marketing is really fading out. And right now, the play in the future has to do with personal branding, has to do with how do you actually impact. You need to be connected to an audience. A lot of people, one of the reasons why I'm on your podcast, like we talked about this is me coming out to the world and saying, yeah, here's who I am. Most of us just kind of say, yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm bragging when I'm talking about these, what's happening in my business, or maybe even some things that I'm doing in my life. However, I've come to the realization is that I'm actually doing my clients a disfavor for not sharing what I actually know and what's happening in my life. And so I had a switch in my mindset. So marketing in the traditional sense, yes, we're still, we have a website now. We're moving in a direction of getting testimonials, all the regular things that you would see that would be standard. But I'm trying to stay, it's a little bit, a couple steps ahead with what's going to really make a difference in the future. And it has to do with creating this kind of, it's almost like a media empire around the brand. And so that would be the secret sauce, if you will, that you're getting from me today, is that my realization is that the traditional sense of marketing, sure, we're seeing some of that, but really it has to do with putting myself out there, speaking to the world. And it's going to take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. I mean, if you looked at my Instagram, I have no followers or very little, right? So I'm at like ground zero, which is super exciting. Other people get discouraged. I'm like, no, man, like I've got so much to look forward to. And so with that's kind of would be my answer.
Okay. And Shelby, you talk about Instagram. Like, what's your opinion on the social media tools? Do you think like I would have thought you would be more a LinkedIn guy just because you're dealing with businesses.
Sure. And so you're right. So LinkedIn is there's a few platforms. Again, I'm learning this. And so I've set up a team around me to be able to do this properly. And so I'm personally still learning. So yes, LinkedIn is definitely, one of my go-to platforms, Instagram, and then we'll see where else it goes. Right.
Okay. Oh, interesting.
But those are the baselines for sure.
Okay. I want to switch gears. I want to know about Shelby, the person now, because
Mm,
obviously you run a successful business, and that's interesting, and that's probably how we met. But to me, getting back to Simon Sinek, I find your why really interesting, and I find your motivation behind what you do very interesting too. So I know that you had a business when you were young. You used to go up and down stairs, selling, I think it was printing cartridges or recycled printing cartridges. Tell me about Shelby, the guy. Like what drove you towards this business? Like, tell me more about you.
sure. So thank you for asking that question because first of all, it is personal, and so I'll only answer it if I'm asked the question. And so, the baseline of who I am. So it's a little bit of if you really knew me,
Yeah,
you would know that I'm a spiritual person,
yeah,
and for me specifically, Christianity is what I have chosen to because I understand it. And it came from my grandmother and my parents. However, they've always said, we believe in God, you decide what you want to do with it. And there were a couple of triggering events in my life that I came back to that question of, do I really believe in this or not? And at the age of 15, I said, yeah, you know what, I'm all in. And that was a pivotal time in my life. And then, back and forth in my faith. And then I had a pretty major life-threatening event. I had a liver tumor that, had to have a major operation. It was the size of like small grapefruit, all this good stuff. And that kind of like I was recovering and that timing of recovery. And when this happened, because it happened to me, I feel it happened to me. I had time to think 3 months of recovery. And it was when I had pivoted my business. I had borrowed over $1.5 million to invest in a manufacturing. I had put my house up for collateral. We had to stop getting salary because our programs and our clients were delaying their orders. And then all of a sudden, I have a liver tumor and I have this major operation. And what the hell? Like, what's happening in my life? I had 2 kids at that time. My second baby was just born. I have 3 kids now. And there was one night where I was thinking, like, I was sweating. Like, what am I going to do? What's happening?
yeah.
And then I went to bed. I woke up in the morning, and it was like I was a changed person. I had a sense that there's no way in hell that I'm dying because I've been put on this earth to do something that is way bigger than me, and this is just like a hiccup, and I just need to like plow through this. And this is where I came back to my faith. And that was my anchor and said, you know what? I believe I have a creator and I've been put on this earth to do something. And so the way I explain it is I've been put on this earth to glorify my creator or glorify God. And then it goes to, well, I have an expertise and everything we've just shared so far. So that's very personal to me. However, it is my anchor. It grounds me.
But I was gonna say
And that was,
it must to a
yeah,
certain like we've had this conversation, and
yeah.
I'm not religious, but I respect your religious aspect of thing. But it
Hmm.
must also guide. It must also. Do you think it guides the way that you help your clients? Like, has it had an effect on how you treat people? Are you more open-minded? Are you more wanting to help them? Are you less, like you said before, I'm less transactional. I want to help my clients. Do you think that spirituality has affected that, or is it just all part and parcel of Shelby regardless?
Well, I think that it has a big play. I mean, again, if you think of a house like that, would be certainly my foundation, my personal foundation,
Yeah.
and I build from there. And the next level to my foundation is my personal core values.
Okay.
And so that I developed, and then as an individual, those ground me, and I really take decisions based on my personal core values. And so those are my guiding principles. And by the way, I do that kind of work with my clients, understanding what the business core values are.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're discovered, right? It's not something that you
Yes.
wish to become.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had a really hard look in my life and say, okay, if I was to have like a team, taking footage of me for a whole week, like 24 hours a day, what would the result of what they filmed actually point to? This is what Shelby's all about. It's what you do on a consistent basis is what you actually value. And so that's a clue. Like and so there's many, I mean, that's in a really short, like I have many different exercises around discovering your core values, personal or business. So I would say that would be like the next level. And then it goes from.
Okay. Very interesting. You know, to me, anyone who's in business, anybody who tries to help other business people, unless you're making a widget and you're manufacturing, you're sitting there and all, you don't talk to people, you just send it somewhere else and the distributor sells it for you. But to me, anyone who's um, interacting with other people has a service, because it's a service, right? Yes, you're a coach, you're a consultant, but to me, anyone who does that, who doesn't have the objective of helping and doesn't see themselves as someone who can share knowledge or help people discover their knowledge shouldn't be in that business. Now, we all come to it from different ways, right? So if you had to tag a religion on me, you'd probably call me a Buddhist more than anything else, right? Because I have those kinds of beliefs. But I know a lot of people who don't have beliefs who come at it from a different area. But we all tend to the people who I find are honest. We all tend to come with this a similar moral compass, which is I want to help the person in front of me, right? And I know
Yeah.
we've had this long discussion, and your core values as an individual and you as a Christian, it comes out that way. But I guess my point here is, and I say this to people often, if you're selling something you don't believe in, you're a shyster. You're just a thief.
Right.
But if you're
Yeah.
selling something, if you're offering a service or you're selling something that you truly believe can make a positive difference, well, that's where you grow and you feel good about what you sell. And the one thing I get from you talking to you is you really believe in what you do. And I think you're really trying to help your clients move forward. And I like seeing that because as a younger
Right.
person, before I went into business, I just thought that all business people, they just want to make money, they just want to screw people, and they just want to have a big house.
Yeah.
So it's really nice for me as I know more and more business people that really want to make a difference. Um,
Yeah.
and
I,
it's nice to see that. Hey, on a totally separate tangent, I want to talk a little bit about Shelby a little bit more. And I know that you do things with people. You bring people on trips. Tell me more about that because I find that fascinating. I like that side of you, like that sort of personal side of you that brings people on trips and about the sailing. So tell me a little bit more about that.
so my sailing experience. So this is where we'll talk about passion, or
Yeah.
what passions do you have in your life that lights you up? And again, I talk to my clients about this is, and I, again, one of my past mentors or coaches was working with me around being able to identify specific things and uh, naming things in my life that I couldn't actually kind of put my finger on.
Hmm.
And one of the questions she had for me is, she looked at me one day and she said, Shelby, um, are your um, are your needs being met? And I kind of went, what are you talking about? And she says, no, like, are your needs being met? And I thought, oh, she said, it's not about being selfish. It's about your needs being met. And I was at a point in my life where it was busy. I mean, we had 3 young kids, like so many activities with them. I was running a business. It was like crazy. And what she realized, and what in the conversation, what I realized is that I was living my life for my family, my kids, for other people, and my business. And
Uh-huh.
I wasn't taking care of my needs. And so one of the things that I started thinking about is, okay, what do I really love? That when I do that activity, like time stops or it just doesn't exist. So in other words, I'm in flow. And so it's kind of being in the zone. And one of those things
Sounds
for me
very
is,
Buddhist, by the way.
It's very Buddhist, yeah. And by the way, like my Christianity background, I would say like I'm very open minded. I believe what I believe, but I don't judge others because
Yeah.
I come to a conversation as I have Paul curiosity, and we have great conversations, right?
Yep.
And so I'm open to the conversations. And so all this to say is that for me, sailing was that time where when I get on my sailboat, everything just kind of chills. And
Yeah.
I remember very specifically where I was super stressed. There was a while back, a couple of years back, and my wife kind of looked at me and she saw that I was stressed and she goes, "You know what you need to do? Just go on your boat." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what I need to do." And I didn't even go sailing. I just went on the boat and I started and I zen out. And so I guess my story here is that what is that for you? Like, what is your thing? And so I have I have a boat here locally, but you can't sail every day in the wintertime. So it's, 6 months out of the year I can sail. And the other 6 months out of the year, one of the things that I've done is I've participated in an ownership group, and we bought a boat. It's a ocean racing boat called Il Mostro. It's a Volvo 70 ocean racer. And so
Nice.
as a group of owners, we offer different sailing expeditions on this boat through a company. So we've a company manages the boat, and they put on these like pretty epic sailing adventures where if you really wanted to, anyone with sailing, like zero sailing experience to being a pro, can get on this boat. And it's a little bit, the analogy is, if you don't know sailing, think of an F1 race, the ones that like the
Yeah.
really fast ones, and we have the Formula One races here in Montreal. And while that car, the equivalent to it on the water is the type of boat that we have. And so
Okay.
it's
It's a
it's
fast
phenomenal.
boat.
It's a fast and phenomenal boat, very technical, intimidating to me, even though I don't know, I'm an intermediate, I would say. I'm not quite to the pro status, but I know what I'm doing. So this boat, allows anyone to cross an ocean, and that was kind of my drive. I have a bucket list, so I call it a bucket list. It's really all these big things I'd like to do in my lifetime, and one of them was to cross the Atlantic Ocean, which I did on this boat. And there are some smaller events as well. Last summer I from Bermuda to Halifax, and it wasn't a race; it was a delivery on this boat. But the interesting part is I learned about that particular journey, and everything that has to do with it, and the conditions change often. So anyway, don't get me started on this topic because I could talk your ear off for about like 5 hours for real. But I guess the message is, when my coach looked at me and said, "Are you taking care of yourself, Shelby? Like, what are your passions? Are your needs being met?" That was one of the things that we talked about. There were multiple other things around that topic, but it's around passions that really lights me up because, again, being an entrepreneur and a business owner, like it's kind of a crazy life. And so I need a bit of a pause to be able to say, yeah, you know what, I'm experiencing life to the fullest. My wife's, equivalent would be tennis. And so she's an amazing tennis player, and she really works hard at it, and she's serious about it. And when we go out there, there's no way I'm beating her. Like, she's like really
I
good,
was going to
and
ask
I'm
you,
competitive.
can
So
you ever beat her? But then I guess
no, like I
against
just
you.
can't, and it's an amazing thing. And I try. Like, come on, I am competitive and I'm pretty athletic, but she is so good. But this is a great thing. So I say it like this because, again, you just find your thing outside of all the other things that is for you, and that's really been helpful for me.
That's great. That's good. Well, look, Shelby, I really thanks for taking the time to talk about all this. Is there a question I didn't ask you? Is there something that we didn't talk about that you think the audience might be interested in knowing a little bit more about you?
I don't know if it's about me, but if there's one thing that I kind of jotted down, and it has to do with, as I was, early in my career when I was a little younger, I was taking all the sales classes, sales courses, etc.
Yep.
Again, is it is there is a technique behind it, so that's fine. But once you know the technique, it's really about reps. And so eventually the technique becomes natural. And that when the technique becomes natural, that's where it goes from transactional to relational.
Yeah.
And when you're able to do the relational part, what happens is this transfer of trust. And that is selling. That is how selling works. And so, you know what? If you're just starting in your career in sales, then yeah, learn the techniques. You have to. You need to understand how that works. At one point, now at first it's going to be clunky, and then at one point, so you got to get your reps in, and at one point it becomes kind of very natural. You're not thinking about it, so you go from being in your head to being in your heart, and that's where like the trust happens. The transactional no longer is a thing, and it's more of a relational. So I don't know. I think
That's
that
great. So I want to add to
yeah,
that because, as you know, I do a lot of sales coaching, and one of the
yeah,
things, and it's exactly what you're saying,
yeah,
is when I'm teaching people to prospect or to do cold calls, I
yeah,
will get them to say verbatim a specific script. Like I make them work within a very hardcore box. And exactly, you call it reps, I call it practice. And then I get
yeah,
them to memorize it. And then I get them to personalize it. And once
yeah,
it's been personalized and memorized and integrated, like you just said, you call it relational. I say it becomes natural. It's the same thing, is it becomes a
yeah,
part of you. And then what happens is that because it's in your muscle memory, like doing reps or whatever, you're able to focus on the person's reaction. So all the subtle body language cues, all the nonverbal cues, all the verbal cues, and then you're able to really make it yours. And making it yours is not necessarily changing all the words, it's how you deliver it. It's the melody in your voice, it's your tone, it's your approach, it's your timing. And I find when you just said that, and I'm happy you brought it up because that's a huge part of being sincere. It's about it being part of you. And if it never becomes part of you, then it's just tactical and it's never relational, and people never feel that you're being sincere. And if they feel you're not being sincere, human beings will run in the other direction because
correct.
they know from the look in your eyes, they know from the tone in your voice. And, and part of the reason you're on this podcast is because I think you're a sincere person, and you have that. You talk about Tony Robbins. I've been listening to Tony Robbins for years too. And when I first listened to Tony Robbins in the 80s, he had those tapes, and it was just, to me, it was like, oh God, he seems like so schmaltzy. But as I got to know him and understood him, he's all about the real human being coming through and really truly wanting to help people. And again, one of the reasons I invited you on this podcast is because I feel Shelby, the entire person, the guy who
Mm.
sails, the guy who's spiritual, the family man, the businessman, they all coordinate together and they all circulate together. And what I kind of like most about you is you're different than me, but we have some similarities in that we want to help out our clients. And I think you're making a difference. And I hear the passion in your voice. I hear the way you deliver it. So to me, it's really an honor to have someone like you on the podcast, and to just express and to see the enthusiasm and the energy. Because honestly, Shelby, a lot of people, at our age in their 50s who are doing something don't have that same kind of passion. They're just thinking retirement. And when I look at
Oh
you, I
yeah.
think this guy doesn't want to retire. He wants to just
No.
help people and go, go, go. And I love that.
So I mean that'll touch on something else. I mean, maybe another little gold here in our conversation is I'm a lifelong learner, right? And I will never stop learning. And here's a little something for that. Again, not a lot of people know about me, but I my university career led me to University in New Brunswick for 1 year. Then I came
Yeah.
back to Concordia, did some skiing on the ski team,
Yeah,
downhill ski
Concordia.
team. And at one point at Concordia, I realized that school, that type of learning wasn't actually helping my businesses that I had started. And so I left university without graduating because
Okay.
in my head I thought
I'm not going to
I'm
let my
I'm
kids listen to this podcast, Shelby.
no, but you know what? It's about learning styles, and so
Yes.
I think that the message is like fit. Like I've got three kids. I'm like, yeah, go to university, get that like that degree. I realized it was not helping me in my business,
Yeah.
but I knew that I needed to continue learning, and I've never stopped learning since then. I've gone to MIT. I've done an entrepreneurial class
Cool.
there for 3 years. Like I've never stopped, right? And it comes back to what I was reading last night. I've been part of a another learning group called Strategic Coach, and I was reading some of what Dan Sullivan, the founder, was talking about your future needs to be bigger than your present all the time. Otherwise, like your future needs to be bigger than your current status. And so that's just a mindset. And he talks about, living to 156 years old, and people misunderstand that. It's all about the mindset of looking forward to the future. And it's what happens is your mind changes around, retirement and working till the last day until I can just stop working. Like, what are you doing? Like in my mind, I teach all my clients in that, like, life is short. Should it be like an enjoyable ride and just do the things you love to do forever? Like, why stop doing what? So you're right. I will never. I like right now. Why should I stop doing what I'm doing? I mean, I am taking care of my health. I am learning all the time, and I'm contributing. And so that's impactful. That's what I'm all about. And so with that, there's one last thing, if you allow me. Do we have time?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so talking about sales and kind of wrapping up there, I realized this week that, I have capacity in my agenda. What that means is I can go and get a couple more clients. And so
Wow.
after this podcast, it's all about technique. And so I'm literally moving to action. I'm going to get on the call, like on the phone, and I'm going to call at least 5 people. And those 5 people will be my clients. Yes, I'm going to be following up, checking in on them, but I will be asking for referrals
Okay.
because they are raving fans of mine, and I will ask them. And so the message here is really simple. That's technique, right? The technical side of it is saying it's all about those reps of like, I still do phone calls. I just also know what gets me clients, and it's referrals. And
Yeah.
so that's the quickest way for me to get. So I'm going to do that. Literally today, I'm going to make at least 5 phone calls to different clients to ask them, how's it going? And by the way, do you know anyone that could use what you're getting from me?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
so,
I think
would
that's
love an
great.
introduction.
Yeah. And
So
I think
just
that,
wanted to kind of land
well,
on that.
I love that. And I have one last closing. I'd like to take, if you don't mind, maybe 5 minutes. I'd love for you to, if you're comfortable doing this, do one of the exercises, a short one that you do with your team, so that we see what does Shelby do, like one short exercise that you're comfortable sharing that doesn't give the secret sauce away.
Sure. Gosh, there's so much there's so much we can do here.
That's a short one. Let's give it like 5-10 minutes max, because
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll go on the core values side of things because
okay.
it's also true for your business and for you personally.
I
So
was gonna say,
I
yeah, we
think
got to do something you can only do with one person.
that right. So that's why I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like what there's many things, and so this will be for you personally, or possibly your senior leadership team, and it's around discovering your core values. And so
Okay.
I'll do this with you, Paul, if you're ready. Do you have something to
Yeah,
write with?
totally ready. Yeah, I got pen and
Okay,
paper. I'm ready. Or
perfect. So
keyboard.
I'd like you to think about um, 3 people in your life, you in your life, living or dead, or even fictional, right? Maybe
Oh,
that you really admire. And so
okay.
just think of like 3 individuals, living or not, or fictional, that you totally admire. So if you're looking at your page, put those names on the left hand side of your page,
Okay.
one after the other. Give some spacing in between the 3 words. You can do, I mean, the 3 people. You can do 3 or 5. We're going to do 3 for now. Do you have your 3 people, or you're thinking?
Uh,
Just take your time.
there's one person I want to add. It's a little corny, but I'll put it in anyways. Okay. I have them.
You got them?
Yeah, we
Okay.
did we didn't practice this before, people, by the way.
We
This is
didn't.
not
I know.
premeditated.
Exactly. So the very first name on top, are you willing to share what that name was?
Yeah, I'll share all of them. So I've
Okay,
got
so the
four
first,
names.
okay, so just, so what's the first person?
They're not in order, by the way. To just like so,
No, no,
they're
it's
not in
fine.
order of importance. So the first
Yeah.
person is a person called Roy Wilson. He's someone that I knew that I met when I was in my early 20s, and he was at that time already in his late 80s. We became buddies. He was an English immigrant who came here from England, who was an architect. He
Okay,
would cross
great.
country
So
ski every day in the winter.
that's good. That's good. So stop. So stop there for a second. So
Okay,
that's good. I
sorry.
just
Okay,
that was good. That's okay. Now, what I want you to do is think about Roy, and on the right hand side of the page, write some words, some adjectives
ah,
about Roy that made him so great. And so,
okay,
what some adjectives, maybe a personality style, a trait.
okay.
What is it about Roy? Like you said, he's sent, like he was cross country skiing, so he was still fit. Like whatever, like he made him so great.
Okay. All right. Done.
So probably four, five, six different words, and then go to your second person. Who's the second person?
It's my grandmother.
Your grandma. So your grandmother. And so again, what are the things that you appreciate about your grandmother? What are the four or five different words that describes what you really value from this person? Like, wow, I'm really admiring from this person.
Okay. Got it.
And then your third person is?
It's my wife.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so do we want to say her name?
Yeah. Marie-Josée or MJ or Joe.
Marie-Josée.
Yeah.
So what about Marie-Josée? And same thing, what are the things that you really admire about Marie-Josée?
Okay.
Okay.
The fourth
So that is
person
the
is kind of weird.
say again.
The fourth person is kind of weird.
Okay, do you want to talk about the fourth
Yeah.
person? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So historic figure for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So and right hand column, same scenario.
Okay. Got it.
Got it. Okay. So are you willing to share your right
Yes.
hand column of the adjective? So just walk through what you wrote down, no more than that, and just kind of go right through the whole list.
Okay. So Roy Wilson, kind, open-minded, knowledgeable, and musical.
Got it. And
Uh,
then
Agnes, caring, selfless, tough, a woman of her era.
yep.
MJ embodies kindness, intelligent, and she's a yogi or yogini,
Yes.
they say. And then
Yes.
Marcus Aurelius, I put leadership, trailblazer, philosopher.
Great. Now that you've gone through that list, look at that list and circle the four or five things that pop off the list that you really connect with. And by the way, if they're repeated, that's a clue.
Okay.
Just like the four or five things that just like, oh yeah, that just pops right off the list to me. Because they're all great things, but there's some things that you're just kind of like connecting with more than other words. Just circle those.
Okay, got him.
Okay, which ones were they?
Kind, open-minded, selfless, embodies kindness, leadership.
Yeah. And so what I've just done with you is I've actually it's not a trick, but what I've done is I've deflected the question. And if I were to ask Paul, what are your core values? You would have been like maybe stumped unless you've done a bunch of work on this. And so I'm not saying that your core values are the ones you circled, but they're definitely directional towards that. And so core values are discovered. And what I've done is I've actually, what you admire in these four people is what you value as a person.
I love Shelby. I love it. I'm blown away. So this is great. This is really good because you're right. I wasn't expecting this, and the way you said
Right.
it, it's so true. And obviously, kind, open-minded, selflessness, leadership, these are things
That-
that are important in what I do, So
they're more, Paul, I would say they're more than important. They're actually core to who you are.
yeah,
And I know there you had, for the first person you had musician and
yeah,
there's a guitar in the back and you
yeah, yeah,
play. So like you value all these things. These are important to you. They're actually at your core. And the work I do with clients is also like it's one of the things I've learned is that to the degree you know yourself, it's that know thyself, then it's easy to say no to things because you understand what to say yes to.
yeah,
When you're saying, your core values is that, how I mentioned, like my foundation is my faith, and then my core values is the
yep,
second layer to my house.
yep,
Like this is what we're talking about. It's the
yeah,
second layer. And when you know yourself, it's then kind of a lot easier to say no to things that are not
yep,
related to your core. So it becomes a filter for you in your life. And we do the same thing in companies. We say, like, what are the company core values? Let's use that as a filter. It's culture in that case, right? And we want to attract people that are like that. So there's a good fit
yeah.
because it's kind of a natural thing when they're going to go into the business. And so anyway, so that's my
Oh,
little maybe
it's
7 minutes.
it's amazing. It's amazing. So thanks again, Shelby. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop the recording now, but stay on, okay? So
Sure.
thanks a ton, Shelby. This is wonderful. I love that last exercise. So yeah, let's we'll see each other again. That's for sure.
That's it. I was totally off the cuff, and so hopefully, yeah, I'm glad it landed.
Yeah.